Hey, Tashima Jones here. Thank you so much for tuning in to Life Club. Super excited as always. Today, I wanted to speak about fear. Yes, FEAR, fear. It's been on my mind. Actually, it dropped into my spirit yesterday, just preparing and meditating about today's topic, and fear really stood out. So I'm really excited to actually discuss it with you today. Now, we have to understand that fear is a mindset. It is not based on a situation or an object. For example, many people are afraid of roller coasters and movie thrillers. However, there is a group of people who actually enjoy those experiences. I personally can do without both of them. But I say that to say that fear is not based on something specific, whether it's a situation or an object. It is truly a paradigm, a mindset that we all carry around. And oftentimes that fear lies dormant until a situation arises or until an object comes into view. For example, if someone is afraid of clowns, they might not necessarily have dreams about clowns or wake up every day watching their back and, in fear of a clown popping out. However, when they see a clown, that fear arises and it's manifested through their responses and through their actions. So once again, fear is a mindset. It is a paradigm that we carry around, and it oftentimes lies dormant until a certain situation or an object of fear itself arises. Now, I wanted to dig a little deeper into natural fears. So, natural fears are, again, based on the situation or circumstance that we may find ourselves in, and we may experience it in the five sensory realm. If a car is coming towards you really fast, you may be afraid. If that clown that you fear is at that birthday party and you didn't know that was on the agenda, that fear will arise. Those external things, those five sensory situations and circumstances and objects are what I consider natural fears. There's things that you are exposed to on the earth in the natural seen realm that cause fear. And those natural fears are really birthed through the spirit. If you are an avid listener of Life Club, we all have acknowledged that we live in and cohabitate in a spiritual realm. And that spiritual realm exists in the unseen. You can't see wind, but you feel it. You appreciate it on a hot day. You can't see gravity, but it definitely keeps us grounded. So we have all acknowledged that the invisible realm, aka the spirit realm, exists. And once again, the more you start to acknowledge that, the more you start to see things in the natural realm so much more clearly. Now, those natural fears that we have really stem from the spirit world, aka the mindset that we carry. You cannot see thoughts. You cannot touch thoughts with your physical hands, but they definitely have an impact on your mind, on your emotions, and eventually on your behavior and the outcome of the things you may do and say, and ultimately your life. So it's so important and so vital for us to first acknowledge this truth about this invisible realm that we all take part in, whether we admit it or even know it or not. So going back to these natural fears that we have, you may be afraid of dogs, you may be afraid of all these other things, but that natural fear that you have is rooted in the spiritual worlds, aka your mind, your thoughts. If you're an avid listener of Life Club, you already know that there are only two trees that we receive thoughts from: the tree of life and the tree of not life, or good and evil as many consider it to be. And when we recognize our superpower as human beings of free will to actually choose our thoughts, we are then placed in the power seat to eradicate fear. Oh, I felt like that was a moment for us see loud. When we recognize our power of free will to choose our thoughts, we can then start to tear down certain strongholds that may have taken root from when we ate of that tree of toxicity, that tree that really created this independence and this separation from spirit. So when we recognize our power of free will to choose our thoughts, and more importantly, the source of our thoughts, we are then able to basically tear down these strongholds of fear. Because when you start to pick fruits, aka thoughts, from this tree of life, it starts to change how you think. It starts to plant a different paradigm, one of faith and hope and of love and of strength and of provision and of protection. And it literally molds your mindset. It changes your posture in the thought realm, so much so that those thoughts of fear start to slip away. Remember, the inner reality creates the outer form. Once again, the inner reality creates the outer form. So oftentimes we're trying to change our natural reality. We're trying to change our five sensory reality. We're trying to change the life that we are living in the external world with external things, with five sensory realm things, with things that we can see, taste, touch, and smell, and even sometimes hear. And what we have to recognize is that the inner reality creates the outer form. So if you find yourself experiencing anxiety or fear in your emotions or in your behavior, you always have to track it back to your thought life. And when you start to recognize that your paradigm is literally framed by fear, by lack, by all of these things that are just reflections of destruction, you are then placed in the power seat to start to change those things and start to break those things. So it's so important and so vital for us to be in tune with our paradigm, our philosophy towards life. And I want to dig a little deeper into that. So when we speak about our paradigm, and when we speak about our philosophy towards life, we always go back to the little kid. We always go back to our 5-year-old self, our 7-year-old self, our 14, 18, maybe even 25-year-old self. We go back to that person and we start to look at the things that we may have experienced over time. And we start to really understand why we think the way that we think. And when we are able to do that, we can then move into this space of healing. And oftentimes our paradigm is just in need of so much healing. It's so fractured. It can be so broken and it can be so torn apart because of the things that we experienced so far in our life's journey. So it's so important for us to be able to really sit down and be transparent. One of our favorite words on LifeClub, and that concept of transparency is being so being so clear that light can pass through it. And being clear is literally acknowledgement. It's literally being vulnerable. It's being vulnerable with spirit and even with yourself about the things that you may have experienced in your life's journey, and being so vulnerable so that truth can pass through it, so that love can pass through it. And oftentimes we are like in a ball. We are so crumpled up like a balled up piece of paper, and nothing can really pass through that. But we have to open up and allow ourselves to be plain, to be authentic, to be real, not only with ourselves, but once again with spirit, in order to truly, truly find our healing. I spoke about this concept of going in for heart surgery, and oftentimes it requires the breaking of bones and the cutting of flesh. And when you think about that, you might not want to go into surgery regardless of how bad you need it. But when you understand that it takes some breaking up in order to heal, you will be so much more appreciative of the process that I like to call spiritual rehab. You think about this person who may have been addicted to drugs for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they go into rehab and they have these cold shakes and they have sweats, and it's almost as if you want to give them the drug so that they can relax and appear normal. But it's the stripping away of the drugs from that person's system that it looks so painful, but it's for their good. And the same is true for our paradigms and our philosophies towards the things that we experience in life. It hurts to learn truth. Let's just take a selah on that. It oftentimes hurts to be stripped away from everything that you knew to be reality, and to take those things away and to remove those things from your thought life. It hurts. It really hurts. You might feel a little weird. You might feel as if everything that you knew of wasn't even true, and where do I go from here? You will definitely experience this amazingly wonderful roller coaster ride in your emotions and even in your mind. And I always say, do not leave the classroom. Stay in the classroom. Oftentimes it hurts so much. The healing hurts so much. The truth hurts so much. The transparency hurts so much that we wind up leaving the classroom before we fully gain the lesson and graduate and move on to the next class. So I encourage you in this time of reflection and in this time of really casting down those strongholds of fear, that you stay in the classroom. I never want to make this process of renewing your mind appear to be easy or a cakewalk, but it is definitely something that you are not experiencing by yourself, and it's definitely something that pays off in the long run. So once again, we are speaking about this concept of fear. We have already learned that it is a mindset. It's not based on an occurrence, an event, a person, a place, or a thing. It is truly a mindset, a paradigm that we walk around with on a daily basis that only comes to life when we are that oftentimes comes to life when we are faced with natural circumstances and objects. Now, there is this fear that we experience only in our mind, and in our emotions, and it may not necessarily be based on something that we currently see, and that fear is anxiety. The fear of anxiety is when you are worrying about something that is not happening and you are in fear of it happening. So I heard it said once that depression is a focus on the past and a worry about the past, and anxiety is a focus on and a worry about the future. And that just stuck with me because it was just like a revelation. Like if you ever received a revelation, aka an aha moment, it's like a light bulb coming on. And anxiety is this fear or worry about the future. It's this intense worry about things to come. And the root of this concept of anxiety is to choke. So oftentimes when people have like panic attacks and they are becoming very anxious, they cannot breathe. It's literally like somebody is choking them. And when it comes to anxiety, I always go back to my birthday, April 5th, 1983. Before this, everybody is going to know my birthday. And my little baby that I always go back to. So yeah, I didn't choose my birthday. I didn't choose to be born on April 5th, 1983. And when I came into this world, I didn't come into this world with worry about how I'm going to eat, or worrying about what I'm going to drink, or worrying about the clothes that I would wear, or where I would live, or the things that I would experience. I came in as a child, and we truly have to carry that paradigm for the rest of our lives. I was going to say into our adulthood. Literally, for the rest of our lives, we have to understand that there is a force so much greater than us that brought us here. And that force will sustain us, will maintain and protect and provide for us. And when we live in a society of independence and everybody trying to do for themselves and even encouraged and pushed to do for themselves, we lose that sense of dependence. We lose that sense of relying on the force that brought us here. So when it comes to anxiety, we always have to once again track back to our thoughts and what was the last thought that we were thinking. And oftentimes that foundation of fear has been laid so solidly that we have to literally start this process of renewing our mind and breaking up that foundation in order to lay a new one. So when we get caught up in anxious thoughts and worry, again, we have to go back to our paradigm. Well, why am I worrying about the future? Is it because when I was growing up, I asked for something and it didn't happen? I dealt with that. For years, I dealt with that. I dealt with almost not wanting to pray or ask or to believe for something more, with this anxiety that it wouldn't happen anyway. And we have to really track back and delayer why we think the way we think, why we experience these bouts or even consistent terms of anxiety. Again, it is a focus on the future, and usually it's a focus on the future not being what you hope for it to be. So when we deal with anxious thoughts, we always have to go back. Well, what is it that happened to me that made me start to think this way? And how do I deal with that? And how do I find healing with that? And the amazingly wonderful thing about life is that every moment is filled with new opportunities. And oftentimes we get stuck in this story that we tell ourselves over and over again, to the point that we actually live out that story. I truly believe in parallel universes, and I truly believe that we are living either in the path that was carved out for us or right alongside that path that was carved out for us. And when we are not in alignment, that is essentially what's happening, because the good life that was designed for you is literally right next to you. And oftentimes it's just a matter of shifting your gaze and taking one step over into that space and place of alignment. And the more I start to deal with and heal with those wounds of the past, the more I start to see myself walking in the path that was made clear for me. So it's so important and so vital for us to always track back where this seed took root of fear and anxiety. Now, when we speak about depression, I mentioned that depression is a focus on the past. It's thinking about the good old days versus recognizing that today is just as well. We start to think about the things that we wish we would have done or could have done, or the people that are no longer here with us, whether they have transitioned or they broke up with us. We think about the jobs that we've lost, and we think about the opportunities that we think passed us by. So it's this constant reflection of the past. And the amazing thing, it's so simple. The amazing thing about the past is that you cannot get it back. Just take a deep breath. You cannot get the past back. And when you really let that sink in, you start to recognize that you either have to walk away and let it be, or you are going to be caught up in this constant cycle. You are choosing to be caught up in this constant cycle of going around in circles, not getting anywhere. You cannot change, fix, patch up, or rewrite the past. And that's the simplicity in those thoughts of depression. It's really recognizing that whatever has happened, and trusting that whatever will be, but allowing yourself to be pulled out of that in order to move forward, and more importantly, be present. So the healing that needs to take place when you think about these things of depression is so important, and it's so vital, because you are literally experiencing the same events over and over and over again when you are constantly looking at the past. And a few things that are so key to healing about past events is acknowledgement, acceptance, forgiveness, and peace. Acceptance, acknowledgement, forgiveness, and peace. When we acknowledge that this thing happened to me, when we acknowledge that this person did this to me, or I did this to this person, when we acknowledge those things, that is the space of vulnerability, aka transparency. We are acknowledging and accepting that an event happened. And then when you get to that space where you acknowledge it alone, you're already starting that process of healing. So when you go from the acknowledgement phase and the acceptance phase, you can then walk into the forgiveness phase. And I learned this from someone years ago, and it always stayed with me. And he said that forgiveness is not saying that the offense or the wrongdoing was okay. It's simply not holding it against that person. And I want to add, it's not holding on to the hurt that was caused from that person, from that event, from that circumstance. So forgiveness is truly accepting and acknowledging that it happened, but not allowing yourself to hold on to the hurt, the pain, the discouragement, or disappointment that was associated with it. And through forgiveness, you free yourself and you pardon that person, because there's a lot of people who have done a lot of bad things, and forgiveness would heal them. Oftentimes we hear forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you. But in all reality, forgiveness is for both parties. Because even if that person doesn't acknowledge that they were wrong, even if you can't even tell that person that you forgive them, just putting forgiveness out into the atmosphere and sending that person forgiveness releases them. Because whether we acknowledge it or not, people who do bad things are people who bad things have happened to, and they too need healing, and they too need forgiveness. So it's so important, so vital for us to really deal with looking at the past. When you get so caught up in the past, you are truly oblivious to the present, and you cannot even move into your future. So once again, we are speaking about this concept of fear, this mindset, paradigm, philosophy towards life that we may carry around, that is rooted and grounded in destruction, in lack, in low frequency thoughts. And when we recognize our superpower to choose our thoughts, more importantly, choose the source from which we choose our thoughts, we are better equipped to thinking, to meditating, to seeing life so much more clearly. We spoke about how fear really takes on the form of natural things. So you're not necessarily afraid of clowns. You're not necessarily afraid of roller coasters, even though I have a whole philosophy about roller coasters and scary movies. You're not really afraid of those things. Those things just manifest the fearful paradigm that you are already carrying. It usually lies dormant until these natural objects come into view, and then the internal fearful things that we experience, or the internal manifestation of fear, is when we deal with anxiety, which is focusing way too much on the future, it's not even here yet, or when we find ourselves trapped in the past, and that is this concept of depression. Depression means to push down, means to press down. And the more you look in the past, the more you are stagnant. You are not expanding or increasing, and eventually you will sink. So it's so important, so vital for us to be mindful of where we find ourselves on this scale of fear, and recognize if we have thoughts that are too far in the future, aka anxiety, whether we have thoughts that are trapped in the past, aka depression, or whether we have a mix of those things. And then once we are able to acknowledge those things, and I don't speak those things over my life, I don't say that I have anxiety, I don't say I am depressed, because I am not going to allow those things to define me. And I encourage you to not let those things to define you. However, we do have to be mindful of our mental state, our emotional state, and how we see life, because those are traces of the very things that you're experiencing on a regular basis. So when we deal with the areas that may trigger or cause these things to rise up in us, we can eradicate those things. And I truly believe that we can eradicate them forever. I really, really believe that the mind is our heart. I truly believe that the mind and the conscience is really, really where life happens. And we have to be mindful of our quality of our thought life. Oftentimes people take it for granted, these spaces of isolation and solitude, and you may get bored and you may be annoyed and all these other things, but it is the perfect time for us to really sit down and to deal with ourselves and to hold up this mirror, if you will, and to look at ourselves, and not for the sake of judgment or for bashing ourselves, but to really build ourselves up. And oftentimes, building yourself up requires some demolition. It requires some breaking down and some destruction in order to really build on a sound foundation. Once again, if you are just tuning in, we have been speaking about this concept of fear. We have learned that fear is a mindset. It is a paradigm that we are literally carrying around. And oftentimes it lays dormant, aka silent, until something in the natural makes it come to life. Oftentimes you may find people who take long periods of time in isolation and meditation who do not flinch or jump at anything. And it's because they are so well aligned with spirit and their inner being that they fear nothing and no one. And I truly believe that that is our divine nature. That is truly our state. That is how we are supposed to walk around. We are to fear no one and nothing. And for this last few minutes, I wanted to speak about this healthy fear. Now, oftentimes we hear, you are supposed to fear your parents, or you're supposed to fear God and all and authoritative figures in your life. And this concept of fearing spirit and fearing God truly is a space of reference. You should only fear someone who has the power to shift and change your entire life. If no one has earned that power, spirit has. So when we go into our spaces of quietness and when we go into reflection mode, we have to go in knowing and having this confidence that you are engaging with the one who knows all things, who sees all things, and who is everywhere. And that in itself should give you such a security and such a confidence that you can rest in and receive your healing. And once again, thank you so much for tuning in to Life Club with me, Tashima Jones, on tashimajones.com or wherever you find yourself watching this video. Super excited as always to have you joining me. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you are right here. And for that, I am truly truly grateful. Make sure you visit me at tashimajones.com. You can find more videos, articles, a whole bunch of stuff, some archive shows, and how to find my app, as well as how to join LifeClub. Until next time, remember your greatness. Talk soon. I am Tashima Jones, and you've been listening